Hello! Welcome back to Nostalgic Conspiracies. So today we will be touching base on hip-hop's wildest conspiracy. You'll have to excuse me, I'm in the process of moving, so unfortunately we don't get the tremendous pink background today, but don't get me wrong, it'll be back. But before we do that, I'd like to pose a question. Power. Who has it? Who wants it? And how far are you willing to go to get it? All right, so we've all heard the basic hip-hop conspiracies like Tupac being alive in Cuba, Beyonce and Jay-Z involved in the Illuminati, which I totally believe is true, but that's a different video for another time, and the Lil Wayne and Birdman sitch, whatever was going on there. Yeah. Our first conspiracy related to hip-hop is the link between mass incarceration and the hip-hop era. So a lot of people believe that right around the time that like 80s and 90s rap was kind of hot is when the mass incarceration rates sparked way up, and you can only imagine what type of people they were mainly targeting. If I have to say it, it was Black and brown communities especially. We've always been targeted. That's what our main focus in the music has been.
Fuck the police coming straight from the underground. A young nigga got it bad cause I'm brown.
So back in 2012, an unsigned letter surfaced. And in the letter, it described a meeting between hip-hop music executives and the private prison industry. Now in the podcast Louder Than a Riot, which will be linked in the description below, if you would like to listen to the whole podcast, please do so. The host, Rodney Carmichael, as well as co-host, break down the letter, as well as have interviews between some pretty famous rappers. So these hip-hop executives were asked to market and promote music, specifically hip-hop music, that glorified criminal behavior in exchange for stocks in the prison business. Alright, so I'm going to read a portion of the letter. I've also linked it in the description, so if you would like to read the entire letter, you're welcome to do so. Quickly after the meeting began, one of my industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everyone else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by the first name and gave no further details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but it was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industry and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable at the strangeness of his gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement. He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions into building of a privately owned prison, and that our position of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of those investments. I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in confusion. At that time, I did not know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with us. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies that received funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more money the government would pay to these prisons. Okay, pause. Can we just talk about that for 5 seconds? So hip hop was born out of the response to racial injustices by police officers and other law enforcing individuals. So in the 90s, there was only 400,000 people incarcerated. In 2020 alone, there is a number of 2.3 million people incarcerated. Today, America. How did we get from here to motherfucking here in a couple centuries? Now it makes so much more sense as to why, songs like The Message was now, the same year that The Message came out, in 1982, Ronald Reagan, released his War on Drugs campaign. I'm sure you all are well aware of this, and if you're not, I'm sure you've heard the saying, just say no. But did you know that that had racially inclined origins?
Where you been? Come on, it's a party. Come on, yeah. Just say no.
It's almost super disrespectful that the entire video is a bunch of like inner city children who, are obviously, in the Bronx, or what we would consider the Bronx of New York, and the whole campaign was built off the backs or the imprisonment of such people. It's just low.
What we've been able to achieve has been done with your help, with us working together as a nation united. Now we need your support again. Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children. From the beginning of our administration, we've taken strong steps to do something about this horror. Tonight, I can report to you that we've made much progress. 37 federal agencies are working together in a vigorous national effort. And by next year, our spending for drug law enforcement will have more than tripled from its 1981 levels. We have increased seizures of illegal drugs. Shortages of marijuana are now being reported. Last year alone, over 10,000 drug criminals were convicted, and nearly $250 million of their assets were seized by the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. And in the most important area, individual use, we see progress. In 4 years, the number of high school seniors using marijuana on a daily basis has dropped from 1 in 14 to 1 in 20.
All right, so we're going to listen to an interview between Killer Mike and the co-host together? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments, but I think what he has to say is pretty important. Listen here.
How he says that hip-hop is his blues. Okay, so back to our original question. Why did gangster rap become so dominant?
At its core, gangster rap was a product of the drug war, a reaction to mass incarceration, not the other way around. And once the music started to mirror these certain stereotypes around black criminality, it really became an easy sell to white America. And that meant records selling by the million.
Of course, it's more complicated than that, too. It's a constant balancing act between authenticity and commodification. And we're going to keep coming back to this idea throughout the series.
It wasn't long before Killer Mike was rapping himself. Fast forward 30 years and he's still at it. And he's at the top of his game right now.
And as time went on, the war on drugs never stopped either.
But here's the irony of it. See, the crack epidemic hadn't even started when Reagan originally unveiled these policies in 1982. Drug crime was actually on the decline. But when crack did finally hit epidemic levels around 85, it legitimized the Reagan administration's drug war spending. And Killer Mike, man, he holds special contempt for the man who set the stage by launching this war on drugs in the first place.
Every day, Reagan is made into a more sterile, worshipful version of the monster he actually was. Reagan was a racist. He was evil in every way. I celebrated his death then, I'll celebrate it now, and I wasn't too fond of Nancy either.
Just say no.
Because you're quite pompous to say, just say fucking no. When your husband has just sent jobs away, despair reigns, well, just say no.
Just say no.
Well, what the fuck are we saying yes to, bitch?
The end of the Reagan era. I'm like 11 or 12, old enough to understand the shit had changed forever. They declared the war on drugs like a war on terror. But what it really did was let the police terrorize whoever. But mostly black
Man, Mike strings together 30 years of history in a single verse.
Yeah, kind of like we're trying to do in this episode. So, let's keep it moving.
Oh shoot, the video got too long. I hope you all enjoyed part 1 of hip hop's wildest conspiracy. Stay tuned for part 2. Remember to just subscribe, okay?